አቶ ያለው በጣም አመሰግናለሁ ስልኬን ስለተቀበልክ ቅድም እንደነገርኩ አንድ ፖስተር ካንስልድ የሚለውን የናንተን
ዝግጅት ጤና ይስጥልኝ ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምን አደራችሁ እንደምን ዋላችሁ መጪው አውደ ዓመት የተቀደሰ የተባረከ እንዲሆንላችሁ እንመኛለን ዛሬ ፕሮግራም ልዩ ፕሮግራም አለን ያው Ethiopian Tribune በሚገኝበት ሀገር ማለት ታላቋ ብሪታንያ ነው ታላቋ ብሪታንያ ላይ ትልቅ ሀዘን ተከስቷል ንግስት ኤልሳቤጥ ዳግማዊት ንግስት ኤልሳቤጥ በሞት ከዚህ ዓለም በሞት ተለይተዋል አሁን ሁለተኛው ቀናቸው ነው ካረፉ ያው የእንግሊዝ ዜጎች ሀዘን ላይ እንዲሆኑ የ10 ቀን የሀዘን አዋጅ ታውጆ አገሪቷ በሀዘን ላይ ንግስቲቷን በመዘከር ላይ ትገኛለች ፕሮግራማችን በዚህ ላይ እንግዶች ያቀረበ ያወያያል እዚህ እንግዳ በያቀረብኳቸው ትላንትና በላይቭ የተገናኘኋቸው ሎርድ ዳንከን ማክኔር የሃውስ ኦፍ ሎርድ ተሳታፊ የነበሩ ለ10 ዓመታት የተሳተፉ አሁን ግን በረፍት ላይ ያሉ ወይም በጡረታ ላይ ያሉ ናቸው በዚያ ጉዳይ እናወራለን በዚህ በንግስቲቷ ጉዳይ ላይ ልጅ ሙሉጌታ ስርዓት ካሳም እንግዲህ ንግስቲቷን ተገናኝተው እና ከእሳቸውም ከኢትዮጵያ የንጉሰ ነገስታት ቤተሰብ ውስጥ ስለነበሩ አባታቸውም የንጉሰ ነገስቱ አገልጋይ ስለነበሩ ምን አይነት ግንኙነት እንደነበራቸው ንግስት ኤልሳቤጥ ከኢትዮጵያ ጋር ሌላው ደግሞ ሰሞኑን የሚደረጉ ዝግጅቶች አሉ በኢትዮጵያ ኤምባሲ ምናምን እዛ ላይ የጻፉት የሚተች እና ሰዎችን የሚማጸን ንግግር ያደረጉት ምንድነው አው ደግ ነው ዝግጅት አርጋችኋል አውደ ዓመቱ ትምህርት ቤት ማሰሪያ ነገር ግን ታላቋ ብሪታንያ ሀዘን ላይ ስለሆነች ይሄንን ፖስፖን ብታረጉ የሚል መልእክት አስተላልፈዋል እሱንም እናስተላልፋለን በመጀመሪያ ግን እንደው አንዳንዴ እንደ አይነት ነገሮች የሰዎችን ሐሳብ ማቅረብ እንደ ጠላትነት የሚታይበት ነው በኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ጋዜጠኞች ይሄን ተናገራችሁ ተብለው ይታሰራሉ ዛሬ ከክቡር አምባሳደሩ አጸያፊ የሆነ ቴክስት ሜሴጅ መቼስ መግለጽ ማልፈልገው ደረሰኝ ምክንያቱ ይሄ ለንደን ላይ የሚዘጋጀው ዝግጅት ካንስል ሆኗል ብለ ወሬ ያብራባህ ነው የሚል አይነት ነገር ነው የተናገሩት እኔ ግን የደረሰኝ ከሃይማኖት አስተማሪ መምህር የዛሬው ትላንትና ላይ ነው የዛሬው ዝግጅት ካንስል ሆኗል የሚል ፖስተር ላኩልኝ እኔ ያስተያየሁት ከንግስቲቷ ጋር የተያዘ ነገር ስለሆነ ምናልባት ዳንኪራና ጨፈራው ቀርቶ ካንስል አድርገውታል ይሄ ሴትዮ ንግስቲቷ እስከምትቀበል ድረስ ብዬ ለጥቂት ግሩፖች እኔ ማኔጅ ማድረጋቸው ግሩፖች አስተላለፍኩ ምክንያቱም የተላከልኝ ሰው እንዲህ አይነት ሐሳብ ያላቸው ሰው አይደሉም ግን አምባሳደሩ እኔ የፈበረኩት አድርገው ነው እኔ ልፈበርከው አልችልም ትኬት ገዝቻለሁ ዛሬ እሳቸው አይደሉም አቶ ያለው ባለበት የዛ አዘጋጅ አናው ክፍል ገዝቻለሁ ይሄ ነገር ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ትምህርት ቤት ይሰራ የሚለው ነገር እኔ አይከብደኝም አያስቸግረኝም ነገር ግን የግንቦት 7 ሰዎች በተክርስቲያኗን ከፍለው በህግ ከፍለውን በተራ እንድንጠቀም ያደረጉ ሰዎች መተው በእኛ ተራ መተው ሲዛበቱ ማየት እንደነዘላለም ተሰማ ያለው ሰው በእውነቱ ነው የምለው ይሄ የሞራል ጥያቄ የሚያስነሳ ነው። ቤተክርስቲያኑን ከፍሎ ምእመኑን ከፍሎ ካህናቱን ከፍሎ ኑና ትኬት ግዙ የሚለው ነገር ልክ አልነበረም። ስለዚህ ተቆጥቼዋለሁ፣ ገስጬዋለሁ። መስደብ አይደለም ሲሰድበኝ ሰድቤዋለሁ። ይሄን ሰውዬ የዚህ አዘጋጅ ነው። ነገር ግን ዝግጅቱ የዘላለም ዝግጅት ነውና አትሂዱ አላልኩም፣ አልልምም። ካንስል ሆኗል እንዳትሄዱ የለኝም። መሄድ የሚፈልግ ራሱ ሞራል ሚዛኑን ይዞ ይሄድ። ከፍያለሁ፣ ሄዳለሁ። አልሄድም። እኔ አይመቸኝም፣ ለመሄድ አይመቸኝም። ሌላ ሰላማዊ ቀን ቢሆን ኖሮ ምንም አይነት ነገር የሞራል ጥያቄ ባይኖር ሊሄድ ይችላል። ግን ብዙ ነገሮች መሰራቸው ነገሮች አሉ። ስለዚህ ስራዎችም ስላሉ አልሄድም። ግን ያ ገንዘብ ሄዶ የሚያገለግል ከሆነ ይሄድ። ገንዘቡ አካሄዱ ልክ አይደለም እንደዚህ ተደርጓል ብለው ኤቪደንስ አምጥተው የጠየቋቸውን ሰዎች እንደ ሚዲያ አስተናግጃለሁ። እነዚህ ሰዎች መልስ እንዲያገኙ አሁንም እጠይቃለሁ። እና አቶ ያለው ደውለው ይሄ ያነካው ነገር እኮ ካንስል አልሆነም፣ አሁንም ዛሬ ይደረጋል እንዲያውም ብለው ፖስተር ላኩልኝ። ቃልም ሰጥተውኛል። ዝግጅታችንን በሳቸው ቃል እንጀምራለን። ከዛ በኋላ የውይይታችንን እናደርግና አቶ አለባቸው፣ አቶ ተዘራ እንዲሁም ልጅ ሙሉጌታ የተናገሩትን ሐሳቦች በዚሁ በታላቋ ብሪታንያ ንግስት በነበሩት በዳግማዊት ኤልሳቤጥ ህልፈተ ሞትና በኢትዮጵያ ላይ ያለውን ግንኙነት እናወጋለን። መቼስ መጪው አዲስ ዘመን የሰላም፣ የአንድነት፣ የብልጽግና እንዲሆንልን እመኛለሁ። እግዚአብሔር ኢትዮጵያን፣ ህዝቦቿን፣ መሪዎቿን፣ ተቃናቃኞቿን ሁሉንም ይባርክ ብዬ እመኛለሁ። ለምትወዱኝ ወዳጆቼ፣ ለዘመዶቼ፣ በዛቻ እንገላሃለን ለምትሉት ባለስልጣኖች ሁሉ መልካም አዲስ ዓመት ይሁንላችሁ። መግደል ሁሉ ነገር የእግዚአብሔር ነውና እንደማንፈራም ወቁት። ዛቻ አያስፈራራንም። ለማረም ሲቪል በሆነ መንገድ መሄዱ ይበጅ ነበር። ነገር ግን የማይጠበቅ ዛቻ ከማይጠበቅ ስልጣን ካላቸው ሰዎች መድረሱ በጣም ያሳዝናል። ግን ማልፍ ነገር የለም፣ ሁሉም ያርፋል። እንደሚጸጸቱ ደግሞ በዚህ በተናገሩት ጉዳይ አውቃለሁ። ነገሩን ለአሁኑ ይዘናዋል። ዝግጅቶቻችንን ተከታተሉ ከምስጋና ጋር።
ስለዚህ
እኛ ፊክስቸሮች ካንስል ሆነዋል
ኮንሰርት እንትን ነው በአጠቃላይ ግን የሚደረገው ነገር ይሄን ነገር ፕሮግራማችን ወደ ኋላ የሚል ነገር የለውም ስለዚህ ንግስቲቱም በኢትዮጵያና በዩናይትድ ኪንግደም በኩል የነበረው ግንኙነት እንዲጠነክር ያደረጉትን እሱንም እናስታውሳለን ከዛ ውጭ ግን የምናደርገው ነገር በሙሉ እኛ ሉዊዝ በመንግስት ባለው ኮንሰልቴሽን መንግስት ባለው መሰረት በህጉ መሰረት ነው ምንም የጣት ነው ምንም የሚፈጥረው ነገር የለም በዛ መልክ ነው እንጂ ዝም ብለን አይደለም ያካሄድ ነው ስለዚህ በመንግስት ደረጃም የወጣ ነገር የለም እንደምትከታተለው እና ይሄ ትክክል አይደለም
የኬንያ መንግስት የሶስት ቀን ሀዘን አውጇል ስለዚህ ምናልባት ሀዘንና ይሄንን ዳንኪራው
መንግስት ሀዘን ማወጅ ጊዜው በጋይድላይንስ ይገለጻል ብሎ እየነገረ ነው አይደል እንዴ
10 ቀን ታውጇል ባይ ዘ ዌይ
የታወቀው ግን ኖርማል የሆኑ ስራዎች እንዲቀጥሉ ሁሉም ይሄን አታድርጉ የሚል ነገር እኛ አልደረሰንም ምንም
ግን ጭፈራ ዳንኪራ ኖርማል ይሆናል ብለህ ነው ኢሜጁን አያበላሽውም ወይ ለማለት
ሴሌብሬት እኮ ነው የሚደረገው የዚህ ሀገር ሞርኒንግ አካሄድ ምንድነው ነው እዚህ ሀገር እየኖርን እንዴት ነው የማይገባል የኛ ሀገር የዚህ
የጭፈራ ኢሜጅ አይደል ገጽን የኢትዮጵያውያን ገጽን አያበላሽም ወይ የሚለው ነገር ነው ኤምፋሳይዝ ያደረጉት እነዚህ ክሪቲኮች
በእኛ በኩል እንግዲህ ሰዎች የተለያየ አመለካከት ይኖራቸዋል በእኛ በኩል ግን እኛ በምንም ታምር ምንም የሁለቱን ሀገር ሪሌሽን የሚያበላሽ ነገር የለውም ከባኪንግሃም ፓላስም ከፎሬን ኦፊስም ሁሉም ነገር ጋኛ ኮሙኒኬት እናረጋለን እንደዚህ በማንኛውንም ነገር ምናካሄደው ሴኩሪቲ በፖሊስ በምን ሁሉ ነገር ጎአሄድ ምንም ችግር እንደሌለብን አረጋግጠን ነው ምናካሄደው እንጂ ዝም ብለን እኮ አይደለም እዚህ ኤምባሲው እኮ የሀገሪቱን ብሔራዊ ጥቅም በማንኛውም መልኩ ለማረጋገጥ የቆመ ነው ያን ሁሉ ነገር ግንዛቤ ሳይወስድ እንዲህ አይነት ነገር ያደርጋል ብሎ የሚያምኑ ሰዎች ካሉ በጣም የሚያሳዝን ነገር ነው
አዲስ ኢቨንት አይደለም ከዚህ በፊት የታቀደ ነው ስለዚህ የሷቸው መሞት ደግሞ ድንገተኛ ነውና ይሄን ነገር ምናልባት እንደገና ሪኮንሲደር እና ሪኮንሰልት አድርጋችኋል
ተደርጎ እኮ በመንግስት ጋይድላይንስ መሰረት እንዲህ አይነት ነገሮች ኢቨንቶች ሴሌብሬት የንግስቲቷን ህይወት ሴሌብሬት ማድረግ ነው አላማው እንጂ ሌላ የለውም የሚል እኮ ነው እየተነገረ ያለው
ስለዚህ አዲሱ አመትንም እንግዲህ ከዛ ጋር እንዲታይልን ነው የምንፈልገው ነው ነገሩ አይደለ
አዎ አዲስ አመታችን እንግዲህ በሳቸው ማለፍ ሴሌብሬት ነው የሚደረገው እንጂ የኛ አዲስ አመት አይከበርም ማለት ነው
ነው እሱን አይደለም አይ ዳንኪራውን ጭፈራውን ነው እንጂ እኮ እዛም እኮ ሆኖ እኮ
የብሪቲሽ ሶሳይቲ እንዴት ነው ሞርን የሚያደርገው ሴሌብሬት ማድረግ እኮ በማንኛው በባኪንግሃም ፓላስ በምንጂግሊንግ ሙዚቃ ምናምን እየተካሄደ አይደለ እያየ ነው እኮ ስለዚህ የግል ሌላ ሰበብ ያላቸው ሰዎች አጋጣሚ ያገኘው እየመሰላቸው የሚጫወቱት ነገር ነው እንጂ ምንም ነገር ብሔራዊ ጥቅማችን ኮምፕሮማይዝ የሚያደርግ ነገር አይደለም እያካሄድን ያለ ነው ስለዚህ ለአንተም የላኩልህ በስተት ነው ሰዎች የላኩልህ ወይም ሆነ
ነው you think ክቡር አምባሳደሩ ምንንም ማስፈራራት እስከ ሞት ድረስ ማስፈራራት ውስጥ ይሄ
ነገር የለም
እሱ ቴክስቱን ልክልሃለሁ ግን ይሄ አግባብ ነው ወይ ለምንድን ነው የማይጠይቁኝ ከየት ነው ያመጣው
ማላቀው ነገር እንዴት ኮሜንት ልስጥ ስለዚህ ምናልባት ይሄ ነገር ትክክል ስላልሆነ
ይሄንን ኮፒ አድርጌ እሰጥሃለሁና ሪትራክት ያደርጋሉ እንደ አይነት ትሬት የላኩት
ስለዛ አይደለም እኮ አሁን እንዳለ ሌላ ነገር ነው የምታወራኝ
ሌላ እኮ አሁን በዚህ ጉዳይ ላይ እኮ እሳቸው ቴክስት አንተን እንዳልከው መናገር ሲገባቸው
እኔ እንዳዘጋጅ ኮሚቴ ነው የምነግርህ አይደለም
ገባኝ እሳቸው ግን እኮ አስፈራሩኝ እኔ የፈጠርኩት አርግ
ሌላ ጉዳይ ነው እሱንማ እኔ እንግዲህ ዝም ብለህ
ይሄ አግባብ ነው ብለህ ታምናለህ አንተ
እኔ ምን ማለት ነው አግባብ ነው ምናምን የሚለው
አግባብ
ሌላ ነገር
ቴክስት ልክልሃለሁ ለኦቶሪቲዎችም ልካለሁ ብያለሁ ግን እንዲህ አይነት ነገር የማስፈራራት ነገር ሰዎች አረግን ያሉትን ነገር ሼር ማድረጉ ካንስል ሊሆን የሚችልበት ፖሲቢሊቲዎች አሉ።
የሀገራችን ብሔራዊ ጥቅም ጋር የተገናኘ ነው። it is not ይሄ የምናደርገው ነገር አንተ ማምነህበት ትኬት የገዛህበት ነው። የወደሙ ትምህርት ቤቶችን ለመገንባት የሚደረግ ነው። እንቁጣጣሽን በጋራ ለማክበር ያደረገው ነው። አንድነታችን ለማጠናከር ነው። ሌላ ነገር የለውም እና ሌላ የተለያየ አጀንዳ ያላቸው ሰዎች ሰበብ እየፈለጉ ሊያደርጉ ይችላሉ። አንተ ግን ወይም ሰዎች ሆን ብለው ወይም አልሆነ መስሏቸው እንደዚህ አድርገው ሊያን ፖስት ማድረግ ትክክል ስላልሆነ ሪሙቭ ብታረገው ጥሩ ነው።
አረጋለሁ። አንተ እኮ ማብራሪያውን ሰጠኝ። በጣም አመሰግናለሁ። ለዚህ ምንም እንትን የለውም። ግን ማለት የፈለኩት
Good afternoon, my lord. Good afternoon, Lij Mulugeta. I have just given you a short notice to discuss about the relationship of the British monarch and the Ethiopian monarch. And sadly, we've lost the Queen Elizabeth II yesterday. And the whole of United Kingdom and the rest of the world are remembering, paying tributes to Her Majesty. And I'm trying to, as an Ethiopian Tribune editor, trying to galvanize tributes to Her Majesty and a special relation to the late King and Ethiopia and Ethiopians at large. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me. Let me start with my Lord, Lord McNair. Can you tell me, I know you have been in the household, in the House of Lords for a decade, during the 90s. And you're a descendant of a very special person who was a personal legal advisor to His Majesty, the King, Emperor Haile Selassie. Could you give us a brief experience of working in the House of Lords and being part and parcel of Her Majesty's service, and let's start with that. I know earlier on we've been discussing about a few things, so we'll come up with that, but how was your experience with Her Majesty's? Thank you.
Well, as a member of the House of Lords, we used to get a very, very formal letter at the beginning of each parliamentary session, which I can't remember the exact words, I should have dug it out, but it talks about protecting Her Majesty from diverse perils, and it's written in wonderfully archaic language, and this was our summons to come to a new session of the House of Lords. I actually took this quite seriously, and possibly some of the things that I regarded as diverse perils, others were quite happy with. But anyway, that was my personal thing. Yeah, I mean, we were she was the presence there, not in the House of Lords, but she used to come to the House of Lords to open Parliament, and that's a very grand event. I was lucky enough to have an office to myself in a building, 2 Abbey Gardens, across the way from the House of Parliament, and just opposite the Victoria Tower, where the carriage and the horsemen used to come to a halt, and so I would sit on the window ledge of my second story office, and I saw the horsemen sort of fan out into a formal protective array, and the Queen would get out of the carriage and then go through the doorway, which is called the Norman Porch, which led into the Victoria Tower, and then she'd disappear. And actually the Victoria Tower is where a copy of every piece of legislation is inscribed on parchment. Well, I hope it still is. Anyway, so I would see her disappear up the stairs on the red carpet, and then I would swivel round in on my windowsill, and I could see her coming up the stairs on the television monitor. And so I could, if I wasn't attending the ceremony that year, I could follow it all on television. So it was, it was really quite spectacular. Once or twice, I was lucky enough to be chosen in the ballot to be allocated a ceremonial House of Lords robe, which is red and ermine. Ermine is a small mammal which puts on its winter coat and attend in the actual chamber of the House of Lords, and that is a very, very grand occasion. So so that was a great privilege to be able to do that. But that was, I guess, the closest I got to Her Majesty while I was in the House of Lords.
My Lord, I appreciate your time and thank you. We'll continue. Let me invite Lij Mulugeta now to take part on his special remembrance or tribute to Her Majesty. Lij Mulugeta, thank you for joining us. Briefly, how was your encounter with Her Majesty? Have you ever had any one-to-one relation or communication or encounter with Her Majesty? And then you can give us a brief of Her Majesty's government contribution to the Ethiopian government, including the late Emperor Haile Selassie, and of course the special relationship between the two monarchs, and subsequently the continuous relationship between the Ethiopian government and the British government, as you have been serving the Ethiopian government as a diplomat in United Kingdom. What resonates in your memories about Her Majesty, her government, and the relationship in between these two countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Index, and my Lord, how very nice to see you in fine fettle. May I start by offering my most humble condolences to the families, to the royal family, to the British government, and the people of this great island. We Ethiopians owe the British, both the government and the people, a great debt of gratitude. because in our trials and tribulations following the revolution in Ethiopia, Britain opened her doors for Ethiopian refugees. Today, hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians live in this country. And I'm sure they will join me in expressing their profound condolences on the death of this great queen. I haven't had the great honor and good fortune of meeting Her Majesty the Queen. The closest I've been to was about 6 meters as a teenager studying at the then Sanford School, now known as the British School. When she visited Ethiopia, paid an official visit to Ethiopia, she came along with her husband, the late Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and on the playing field, on the football field, we were wearing something that represents Ethiopia. And a friend of mine, 4 of us, decided to represent the heroic Ethiopian armed forces. And I remember I somehow managed to acquire a Navy uniform, very handsome Navy uniform. And I saluted, and both of them gave us a smile and passed away. That was my personal close contact. But I can vouch for Her Majesty having a cordial, more than a cordial relationship with the House of Haile Selassie. The Queen and Emperor Haile Selassie got along very well indeed. She made him a field marshal of the British Army because he led British Army to liberate Ethiopia. Then she made him, bestowed upon him the Noble Order of the Garter, the first African to receive that. No other African has received that. This shows you how it all started. And then whenever the emperor paid a visit, she would send one of her Rolls Royce to be at his disposal. If you see pictures of her entering Addis Ababa on a coach, which I want to say something about, the reporter there, a British reporter, BBC reporter, I forgot his name, he said, the Queen left Buckingham Palace, London, to arrive at a mini Buckingham Palace in Addis Ababa. You know, everything was a facsimile of the Buckingham Palace there. The attard, coachman, and everything was perfect. And even then, I, as a student of the Sanford School, lined up very close to the Jubilee Palace and saw her at a distance. My father was the governor of Eritrea when she paid a visit to Asmara. And he told us what it was all about, how it all went. And it was there that the Queen presented the emperor at a banquet at what was then called the Tinsaye Adarash, the Tinsaye Banqueting Hall, with the crown of Emperor Theodros. And soon after, she called upon my father and bestowed upon him the Grand Commander of the Victorian Order, one of the highest orders of Britain, which my father cherished it to his dying day. All in all, in exile, the Queen provided air ambulance to the Crown Prince of Ethiopia when he fell ill in 1973. That shows you how close the relationship has been between Buckingham Palace and the Jubilee Palace. Ever since his being hospitalized here, she's been visiting him, she's been sending messages of good wishes and that. And she very subtly helped senior members of the Ethiopian royal family in their times of adversity. I don't want to go into details on what she did, but because I'm not privy to that in the first place. But all in all, the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, enjoys one of the most privileged places in the hearts and minds of Ethiopians. One other thing that I want to mention here was, as a Deputy Director of the Millennium Celebrations Secretariat, one of the things I proposed was, I say this with all humbleness, is that Ethiopia should ask for the repatriation of the remains of Prince Alemayehu, who is buried within the precincts of St. George's Chapel, Windsor. And the government of the day accepted this, and the late President of Ethiopia, President Girma, signed a letter, a very good letter, drafted, I think, by that intellectually nimble Dr. What's his name? He was a Minister of State at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Forgot his name, my God. Anyway, he wrote that, he drafted that beautiful letter. It went to Buckingham Palace, and then came the reply. The way it was drafted, praise after praise of the welcome Ethiopians provided her. And how she said she was moved by that sleepover she had in the Simin Mountains. She had a special heart for Gondar, presumably because it was the Emperor Theodros, who lived in Gondar, who had arrested British British men who went to Ethiopia. And, she became so curious because she has heard about Gondar, the mountains of Simin. And the British army built a bridge in Gondar, and she had vivid memory when in the letter she described it. And she said, I would be delighted to return it had it not been for the 40 other remains of British citizens there. It would be disturbing the peace and tranquility of those. So, but you can see from the letter that she was absolutely thrilled with her visit in Ethiopia and had great respect for Ethiopia. And that is why, may I just, Ethiopians who love their country, who have a burning desire to help Ethiopia during her existential war up in the north, had organized a fundraising event tomorrow. How very unfortunate this has happened. There is no fast and hard rule on how organizations should respond to the 7 days. It's 7-day or 10-day mourning. But I hope His Excellency the Ambassador would use his discretionary power and cancel it in order to show the respect of Ethiopians have for the legacy and memory of Her Majesty the Queen.
Thank you, Lij Mulugeta. We'll come up. We'll construct that. But let me add, my Lord McNair, with regards to how do the British public servants like yourself remembers the Her Majesties who have been serving the public for over 70 years on official capacity and unofficially as a member of the monarchy, the household. She was engaged earlier serving the public. And how do you actually see or reflect her services, and how now people are going to remember her? I understand it's about 10 days of a special remembrance for Her Majesty. So is it fitting her special contribution to the public as a servant? She served and she's made a special speech when she was commemorating, and you also remind me what you were doing at that time, and in reflection of the times you've shared some beautiful information earlier on. So would you kindly share that with me as well, please?
Well, from my point of view, she was always there as a steadying influence, and she was a constant, and has actually been a constant all of my life, because I remember the coronation, because I'm old enough to remember the coronation. And of course, we didn't have television in those days. And I would have seen it in the, what was called, there was a newsreel program called Pathé News. And there was actually something extra special about the coronation day, because 9 days previously, Sherpa Ten Singh and Sir Edmund Hillary had been the first people who are known to have conquered Everest. And because we weren't in a Wi-Fi world in those days, it actually took 9 days for the information to reach the UK. And the information arrived on the day of the coronation. So it was an extra cause for celebration, because it was, although Sir Edmund Hillary was a New Zealander, it was, you know, it was a British Commonwealth event. We were still close enough to empire to take ownership of it, although New Zealand was, by that time, was a dominion as part of what was then the British Commonwealth and is now the Commonwealth. And that was very, very thrilling for me. I mean, I was 5, I think. No, I was 6 when the coronation happened. But I remember at the age of 5 going into the local town, which was called Stroud, with my mother. And everybody was, I mean, all that time ago, 71 years ago, everybody was saying something which I wasn't really, you know, aware of, but the king has died. And so I came back, we came back from shopping, and I said to my father, did you know the king has died? And he was very impressed that his 5-year-old son had actually given him the news. But as, oh, sorry, that's, let me, I just need to, no. Okay, that's fine. So for, well, all of my conscious life, really, she has been there as a steadying influence. I'm sure guiding the country behind the scenes with a meeting with every prime minister every week. So she's been keeping her finger on the pulse of what's been happening in the country. And that's really all I can say, that she's, her loss is a huge loss to the country, and the difficulties that we have faced in the past 3 years, I'm sure were easier because of her presence.
It's a great tribute. This morning I was cycling through the St. James Park and Buckingham Palace, and thousands of people flocking in with flowers, perhaps flowers from Ethiopia, to put at the gates of the palace. And the somber mood, the deafening quietness, very quiet it was. Everyone was moving around without making any sound, and you see seas of flowers and journalists, and obviously the presence of the police, and I think for the coming 7 days, the British subjects, as well as those who are visiting United Kingdom, perhaps across the globe, will remember Her Majesty's, and obviously will express their sadness of her sudden death. My Lord, what I'm trying to get from you is also your special relationship with Ethiopia. As I said, the flowers are laying just outside the gates of the palace, and I'm sure of it that some of them are originated from the Ethiopian farmers who have been given a special deal to sell them here in the United Kingdom market. Morrison, one of them, have had access to such items like the flowers. But what do you, from your personal experience as well as the family relationship, what do you recollect with the relationship of the late Emperor Haile Selassie and your family? I'm just trying to get a picture.
It's I mean, my grandfather was Emperor Haile Selassie's legal advisor in the United Kingdom from I think it was 1936 to 1941 was the period of exile. And of course, it was the exile came to an end when the Ethiopian army drove out the Italians. So, but I do know my grandfather had a farm at Cambridge, and I do know that Emperor Haile Selassie visited him at the farm. And there is a picture in my grandfather's archive, I believe, of him at the farm. And there was a picture of him playing with the Bedlington Terriers, which are were the favorite dogs on the farm. And actually, the coat of arms that my grandfather chose when he was made a lord, unusually include, in heraldic language, Bedlington Terriers rampant. In other words, the escutcheon is actually supported pictorially by two white Bedlington Terriers. But I know that my grandfather had a very great concern for fairness between countries, and he would have been horrified by the Italian invasion, obviously by the whole Second World War episode. But the occupation happened before the Second World War, although it was looming. I'm just very proud. I know nothing about the period, but I'm very proud that my grandfather was able to help. Actually, what I would like to do, but I haven't had the opportunity, is to visit the archive at Caius College, Cambridge, and see what material there is from that era, and from his engagement with the Emperor Haile Selassie and the Ethiopian issue. I'm learning all the time since I first connected with the Ethiopian community in London and elsewhere. I've learned an enormous amount, not particularly about my grandfather's involvement, but also about Ethiopia. And I have to say that Ethiopia, to me, Ethiopia is a very special country. I mean, to actually be the really the sole surviving country of original Christianity is something which I'm sure Ethiopians treasure. What I do is I have a UK registered not-for-profit called Peaceful Planet Human Rights Education. And Peaceful Planet Human Rights Education is very happy to be at the service of helping resolve current problems in Ethiopia. We're actually working on a project to bring peace and human rights education to Somalia at the moment, and the whole Horn of Africa could do with a helping hand in that regard. So I'm proud of my grandfather's help, and I'm very pleased to be engaged with that part of the world, and very happy to see what I can do to help.
Many thanks for your time, my lord. We won't keep you hold for a while. Perhaps an engagement with another participants in Amharic will continue, but I will ask a further question. But let me invite Lij Mulugeta on this. Lij Mulugeta, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am loud and clear.
Thank you. Lij Mulugeta, what I'm coming to now is as a diplomat here in the United Kingdom, I've noticed that most of the new diplomats, especially the ambassador, when they arrive or when they take up their mission, their credentials will usually be given to Her Majesty in person. Can you give us how this is conducted throughout your service? I understand that you've been serving the embassy for over 15 years as an official diplomat, or around that time. So you must have seen ambassadors exchanging their posts now and then and presenting their credentials. How is it done, and what's so special about it? Thank you.
Very good, thank you. It all starts with the appointment of an ambassador to the Court of James's, of St. James. Don't forget, Buckingham Palace was the official residence of Lord Buckingham. British monarch's home was a few yards from Buckingham Palace, a small place called the Court of St. James. So accredited ambassadors to the United Kingdom are sent to the Court of St. James's. When ambassadors come to Ethiopia, they are accredited to the Court of the National Palace of Ethiopia. In this instance, it is the Court of St. James. The letter of credence of the present ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Tafari Maldesa, states that he is accredited to the Court of St. James. But it doesn't mean that the Queen resides or officiates or receives letters of credence of ambassadors at St. James's. It is at the palace. Unfortunately, the present ambassador came at a very unfortunate time during the COVID lockdown epidemic, and he had to present it by digital means. What happens is all the protocol is there. A gilded carriage will be sent to him, and he will then, no, before that, the Chief of Protocol of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office comes and debriefs the ambassador on what is expected of him, how he should address the Queen, how he should present his credentials, so on and so forth. This applied also in Ethiopia. There was a time when Emperor Haile Selassie received accredited ambassadors by meeting them in the throne room, but before they entered the throne room, they had to go through 2 lions outside the Jubilee Palace. But in the United Kingdom, a carriage is sent for the ambassador and for 4 senior diplomats who will accompany him. You would bow and present to the Queen after he makes an introductory speech to the Queen, like greetings from the President and people of Ethiopia, that sort of thing. I accompanied an Ethiopian ambassador in Dublin, Her Excellency Ambassador Leilalem, and the same thing happened with the President of Ireland. British-Ethiopian relations have stood the test of time like no other. 17 years rule of the Derg was the bottom line. There was something that Britain would not accept in Ethiopia, the random arrest and killings of innocent men and women, that sort of thing, which had a disastrous effect in terms of relations between Ethiopia. But nowadays, it's good and growing from strength to strength. I hope I have answered your questions more or less.
You have. Can I add another question with regards to the special relation between the Ethiopian government and Her Majesty's government? And obviously, I would like you to touch upon the special deal the Ethiopian exporters and the business community get through Her Majesty's government, which, as I said earlier on, the sea of flowers at the gates of the palace, speaks Amharic, speaks an Ethiopian language, because some of the flowers actually originate from Ethiopia. So I would like you to kind of highlight this, because it's enriched the relationship of these two countries. So I would want you to address that. Thank you.
Good. I'd like to start off with flowers. There was a time during the Olympic Games when Ethiopian Embassy launched what we called Cultural Olympics. So one of the things that we did was we imported 2,000 stem roses from Ethiopia. And we listed important cabinet ministers, including Her Britannic Majesty, the Queen. For the Queen, we made sure that we gave her 200 stem flowers. And I was given the task of arranging this with the good offices of her Buckingham Palace. And they said, thank you very much, 200 is too much. And let me tell you something, we need a trolley at hand. A trolley, he said, yes, a trolley, because I and my colleague will not be able to carry it to your office or whatever. So we went at the appointed time, and we were met by an attendant. He said, Her Majesty is in Windsor, but we've been given instructions to bring it straight to Her Majesty. We said, all right. And he brought in a trolley, a big trolley, and a florist in South Kensington very graciously provided the arrangements. They came through Ethiopian Airlines, and then she made a very nice bouquet. So it took, and guess what? 4 days later, His Excellency Ambassador Birhanu Kabada, who was then Ethiopia's ambassador to the Court of St. James, received a very nice letter from Her Majesty the Queen, thanking him for these exquisite, is the word he used, exquisite flowers from Ethiopia. And also sent him a signed autograph of a portrait with the Duke of Edinburgh. I'm sure he will still cherishes it in his retirement. Now, the other thing we did was send it to the Prime Minister, who was Cameron, David Cameron, at 10 Downing Street. And journalists who saw this took a picture, and they said, Ethiopians did it with flowers, roses. So it was a great promotional. I don't know, many people realize that Ethiopia is one of the major exporters of flowers to the United Kingdom. One company, Morrison's alone, I'm talking about 3-4 years ago, imported 35 million stem roses from Ethiopia. Today, I'm pretty sure it will be over 50-60 million. Ethiopian roses are bright, colorful, and last long. So relations with Ethiopia are twofold. Government to government. The British government is a development partner of Ethiopia. People to people, more people are interested to go and visit Ethiopia, thanks to the promotional, what's her name provided us? Joanna Lumley provided us. She made a documentary film about Ethiopian churches in northern Ethiopia. Viewers has reached over 1 million on YouTube, And she came to our embassy when we launched a book that she provided the foreword for, and said so many good things about Ethiopia. So all in all, relations between Ethiopia and the United Kingdom are growing tremendously. And, of course, temperatures go up and down because of politics, but they are true friend. The Brits are true friend of Ethiopia, and they have showed it in blood, sweat, and tears. They came, we fought against them, and we fought with them. So let's take that as a positive gesture and move on. I don't know if you want me to say a few things about the present dilemma that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I know my Lord Duncan McNair may have to say a few words, and then we will continue with our conversation. My Lord, how are you going to, well, I know you have been serving the House of Lords, and obviously you and your colleagues may be invited to a special remembrance and so forth. So how is Britain ready to give a good send-off to Her Majesty, and how is it planned?
Well, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. You see, I was in the House of Lords from 1990 to 1999. Because I inherited my title, when the House of Lords Reform Act in 1999 was passed, my time in the House of Lords came to an end, because it was decided that it was out of date for people who inherit a title to sit in the Parliament. And so you see, what had happened was in 1958, all of the members of the House of Lords were inheriting their titles or were appointed newly. But in 1958, Harold Macmillan brought in the Life Peerages Act. So all the members of the House of Lords since that time were lifetime only. So by the time 1999 came, so that is 40 years later, there were about half of the members of the House of Lords were hereditary and half were appointed, lifetime only ones. And I think it was probably to retaliate against something that Margaret Thatcher had done when she was Prime Minister, that Tony Blair brought in the Life Peerages Act, the House of Lords Reform Act. So that said that apart from a small group, which was a bit complicated to describe, the hereditary peers lost their right to sit and speak in the House of Lords. So I'm an ex-member of the House of Lords, and I can go there and have the occasional lunch and that kind of thing. But I haven't been involved with the House of Lords now for 23 years. And so, I'm sorry to be not very helpful, but I'm sure if I were a serving member that there would be something that I would be involved in. I'm not party or part of the celebrations myself.
And how do you think that as an ex-member of the House of Lords and as a public servant, you're still active, serving, in this case, you're a global servant of what you do. How do you see that the British people throughout the country would pay tribute? I know officially, is it 10 days?
I believe so.
10 days, yeah, for 10 days.
Is it 10 or 7?
It's 10 days, I believe it's 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah, so for 10 days, officially, we would pay tribute to Her Majesty. And how do you see that? I mean, we can conclude that with you on that one, my lord. How do you see that going through into the region and where you are, and how are people taking this departure of Her Majesty?
Well, obviously, it's the topic of conversation at the moment, well, I can tell you that a friend of mine who works for the St. John's Ambulance Brigade, he is likely to be called to London to man an ambulance to work in, with the crowds that are going to be there. But also, I think that the St. John's Ambulance will be, as part of a parade in their uniforms. I'm sure that all sorts of community groups will play their part and will participate in the remembrance. I'm somewhat handicapped because I don't have, not physically, but culturally, because I don't have a television.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, not to get too controversial, but I think that most of what we are fed on news broadcasts is serving particular interests, and I'm really much more interested in the information that I can get out of the citizen news channels.
Journalists like us.
Yes, exactly. So you're my people.
Okay, we appreciate that, my lord.
So that's really all I can say.
I won't hold you, but if there is anything you want to add to conclude this Zoom meeting with us, because we're going to continue in Amharic, and I don't want you to feel left out. Yes.
Okay. All right. So, well, all I would say is that my first real encounter with the community was a wonderful event which took place in London on the 17th of July, which was a celebration of somebody that the Ethiopian people and community hold in very high regard and feel very warmly disposed to, and that was Sylvia Pankhurst. And that gave me the opportunity to meet a number of key members of the community and to start to engage with the issues that you were all facing. And so that was my, if you like, baptism of engagement with the Ethiopian community. I am, as I say, I'm working on human rights and peace education. So I'm very happy, and I've had many conversations with you, Index, and other key people who are involved in the whole peace issue. You talked about global service. Well, Peaceful Planet is interested in a number of different parts of the world, but I actually visited, as a member of the House of Lords, I visited, and later I must have visited Sudan about 18 times. And of course, Sudan is a neighbor of Ethiopia, and all of the countries of the Horn of Africa could do with a little bit of help in the realms of peace education. So I'm very happy to know you all and to be involved.
Well, it's a pleasure having an encounter with you, my lord, and I know you are helping us in great deal, not only me, but a number of organizations, including the people who invited you to take part on the celebrating Sylvia Pankhurst and her family. You met Professor Helen, and you've learned a great deal about the special relation of the British people and Ethiopians at large. So I'm sure you will continue to contribute to enrich this, and we do appreciate that. I mean, you're very welcome to stay, and I'm going to engage the participants in Amharic so they can pass a message, because tomorrow, the eve of the Ethiopian New Year.
Is it?
Yes, there are programs, controversial programs that are going to happen in the embassy, where a number of people, including Lij Mulugeta, have raised their eyebrows, say that, look, the event of celebration should be replaced with remembrance rather than celebrating, because Her Majesty the Queen has contributed a great deal to Ethiopia. Hence, the ambassador took initiative to postpone the event for another time, another date. But paying tribute to Her Majesty would be an appropriate things to do. And we've noticed a number of even cancellation of fixtures like football and other concerts have been declared. People have declared that they will be cancelling their concerts, their fixtures, football fixtures, because of paying tribute to Her Majesty. So we'll be discussing that. But if you have anything to say with regards to officials somehow being seen taking part in remembrance rather than doing their quote-unquote their daily activity, especially with regards to
there is just one thing I would say, and this is that in British tradition, the palace announces, in this case, the Queen is dead, long live the King. So this is the Ethiopian New Year about to start. I just note that we have a new reign about to start. So, with every end, there is a new beginning. So I wish you well. I will bow out now and allow you to continue in Amharic.
Many thanks for your time. We'll work on, and I do appreciate, because I've just given you a very short call and you've answered for that, and I appreciate that, sir.
You're very welcome. Okay, well, goodbye all.
Thank you. Sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.